911 operators. What is that one call that you could never forget? Harley motorcycle tipped over and the clutch lever went into a 4-year-old's eye. Parent was on the line asking what to do. Suddenly, she said, "They're going lift the motorcycle." I emphatically told her to tell them to stop and wait for rescue and EMS. Rescue ended up cutting off the clutch lever and transporting the kid to hospital. She underwent surgery. That was 1982. Just last year, I met the lead rescue officer and the girl herself. Now fully grown. They wanted to meet the 911 operator that saved her vision. To anyone reading through the comments, never remove the object from a puncture wound unless it's in someone's airway. I suppose that technically this isn't a puncture, but it's the same principle. Edited because I was rightly corrected. Added the almost. I'm a dispatcher for a cab company. One day I got a call from an old man who seemed as if his voice was trembling. I'm naturally polite as I asked for his drop-off address. He said the emergency room. I casually said, feeling a little under the weather. I tried to take my life. I vomited most of the pills up and now I feel miserable. Can you send a cab quick? Certainly, sir. Anything else I can do for you? I talked to him for 15 minutes before the can pulled up and the driver carried him out to his car. He told me his life story and why he tried to end it. I visited him in the hospital as soon as my shift was over. He still calls for a cab every day to take him to a barbecue restaurant. I had a call that started out pretty dumb, but was actually pretty serious. 911. Where is you emergency? 123 Main Street. Okay. What's going on there? I'd like to order a pizza for delivery. Oh great. Another prank call. Ma'am. You've reached 911. Yeah. I know. Can I have a large with half pepperoni? Half mushroom and peppers? I'm sorry. You know you've called 911, right? Yeah. Do you know how long it will be? Okay. Ma'am. Is everything okay over there? Do you have an emergency? Yes. I do. And you can't talk about it because there's someone in the room with you. Moment of realization. Yes. That's correct. Do you know how long it will be? I have an officer about a mile from your location. Are there any weapons in your house? Nope. Can you stay on the phone with me? Nope. See you soon. Thanks. As we dispatch the call, I check the history at the address and see there are multiple previous domestic violence calls. The officer arrives and finds a couple. Female was kind of banged up, and boyfriend was drunk. Officer arrests him after she explains that the boyfriend had been beating her for a while. I thought she was pretty clever to use that trick. Definitely one of the most memorable calls. Wow. I really hope that every 911 operator has the same level of quick critical thinking skills that you have. Very impressive. I've always assumed that they're trained to recognize things like that. I hope so at least. Exactly. Doesn't this kind of thing happen all the time on TV? Either that, or the person calls 911 and puts the phone in their pocket. Edit. If something seemed off about a call, that's the first thing that would go through my mind. My little sister dialed 911 once when she was a toddler. She just dialed it and set the phone down somewhere. Just a few minutes later, an officer showed up at the door and told my mom that By law, he had to come in and make sure everything was okay. Because when they get a silent call, it often means there is some kind of domestic dispute. Or at worst, a hostage situation. She was very upper middle class. So I believe he was being quite genuine in saying that. My little sister once got a hold of a phone and dialed miscellaneous numbers with 911 in the front. It turns out that in order to protect people who may be dialing in a panic, that any string of numbers beginning in 911 will contact the police. Officer shows up and I, at that time a young teen, answer the door. He gave me a talking to until he saw my sister walk by carrying the phone. It turns out that in order to protect people who may be dialing in a panic, that any string of numbers beginning in 911 will contact the police. I think that is generally true for all phone numbers. For entirely technical reasons. With old phones, you didn't type the phone number and press dial. You just dialed your numbers and it would initiate the call immediately when you dialed enough numbers to be patched through to an endpoint. They can't send you to phone A first, but then redirect you to phone B when you type more numbers. I'm not a 911 operator, but I spent time doing OnStar/telematics type stuff. And the moments you remember are those when you're still connected to the vehicle once the dispatch has been made after an accident. I've heard a brother beg for his other brother not to die as he bled out. Not sure if he actually did. The one that has stuck with me the most is the one I initially heard the least on, airbag signal. Connected to vehicle. I heard a sigh and then silence outside. Nothing but the sounds of passing traffic. A co-worker then completes the dispatch standard procedure and I attempt to make contact a time or two with no luck. It's simply a matter of remaining on the line to listen to make sure the ambulance gets there. Then, a car stops and I hear talking in the background. Soon after, someone else stops. Finally, someone starts a last rites type of prayer after asking someone to join hands. I realize then that what I heard at the very beginning of the call was their last breath. The only time that this person's entire existence crossed mine was at the last possible moment. And they don't even know it. Life is fickle. Be good to everyone. It creeps me out thinking of the inside of that car after the driver has died, your voice checking in periodically trying to make contact. But no one there to hear you. Shivers. So sad. And at the same time, I think it was good they weren't entirely alone when they went. What a hard job. My first call I ever had to dispatch on the radio. 2 homeless dudes blowing each other on the bus. I'm sorry, it's not serious. Are traumatic, but it will always stay with me. This is dispatch. We have a code 69. 2 men exchanging blows. Edit. Wow. Thanks for gift of gold. I started making blowjob jokes back in 8th grade. So it is nice to know that persistence and hard work pay off in the end. Thanks again. I was a 911 dispatcher for several years, and one of my most memorable calls was a hysterical woman at about midnight one stormy night. She was absolutely incomprehensible. I kept saying, "Ma'am. Ma'am. You have to calm down. I can't understand you. Ma'am." This went on for what felt like forever. I couldn't get anything useful out of her. My officers were en route to this obviously horrifying situation. Finally, she said something about being with her sister. "How old is your sister?" 1. Instantly suspicious. I asked, "How old are you?" 5. A 5-year-old boy. So that's how I inadvertently called a little boy ma'am many times. Oops. The storm had woken him up and his parents were gone. They went out to move their cars to shelter in case of hail. He was just very scared. My officers still responded and talked to the parents about not leaving sleeping children alone. But everybody was unscathed. It wasn't my most tragic call, but it is one I've never forgotten. Poor little ma'am. Poor little ma'am. Ha ha ha. Excellent story. Not a 911 operator, but volunteered on a crisis call center hotline. I had just turned 18 and was fresh out of training. It was maybe my 8th or 9th shift at the center. It wasn't my first call with a suicidal person. However, it was the worst and scariest for me. This man had locked himself up in his home with a gun and was going to shoot himself. He wasn't calling to have someone talk him down. He told me that he wanted someone to hear him die. Of course, at this point, I'm trying to find out where he's at. I'm tracing his call and talking to 911 on my other phone. He says in the most calm and serious voice, "You're not going to have time for that. Just listen. And it will be over soon." I finally get a trace on the call, and I'm reporting it to the 911 operator. Then it begins. I can hear him fumbling around with the gun, and the clicking of the trigger/barrel. He's getting frustrated because the gun is jammed. With each click and rattle, I'm expecting to hear the gun go off. I'm literally dripping with sweat. This goes on for some time, and I'm trying to keep him on the line and to focus on the conversation as he's trying to fix his gun. It seemed like eternity. But I finally heard the police at the door. They had to kick it down since the man refused to open it. They got the gun from him and the call ended. The cops later told us they couldn't figure out why the gun had malfunctioned. That really, he should have been dead. So he was either really lucky or not, depending on your thought on the situation. Regardless of it, I didn't last much longer as a volunteer. I started having extreme anxiety every time I picked up the phone, imagining that I was hearing the clicking of the gun. I'm 26 now, and I think I am finally in a place where I could do that type of volunteer work again. Edit. A word. I used to work as a relay operator 711 and often got misdialed 911 calls. We would connect them to 911, but since they connected through us, we had to stay on the line. One time I got an old woman who fell out of bed and couldn't get up. I connected her to 911 and from there they tracked her location. The 911 operator is like, "Ma'am, are you in such and such hospital? Are you calling from the hospital?" "Yes. I fell and no one will help me." Not sure what the 911 operator did, but about 10 minutes later you hear someone come into her room to help her up. Apparently this woman fell out of her hospital bed and no one noticed for over an hour, until she dragged herself to the phone and called 911. I was like, note to self, never go to this hospital. 5 years ago, I developed an SVT, supraventricular tachycardia, a very fast heart rate. After they reset my heart in the ER, they decided to admit me for tests. I had all these wires connected to me so I could not get up. I could not reach the buzzer to call the nurse, but I did have my cell phone. After 3 hours of lying there waiting for a room to open, my bladder about to burst, I called the hospital phone number and asked them to send me someone so I pee. Apparently, they had a big emergency and everyone got busy. Shift change and hello. Remember me?